everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, welcoming you to my channel. Tonight we're going to be continuing with our playthrough of The Lamps Are Going Out, World War I. The turn is spring 1915. This is a list of the current casualties thus far in the conflict. Germany has lost 114, and I believe at this point it looks to be regiments. If you do the math on it, taking a regiment of approximately 3,000 men and you multiply it out, it comes out an unbelievable number. So for the moment, we're going to use this as lost regiments for each of the nations. Germany's lost 114, Austria-Hungary 30, Great Britain 11, France 57, the Russians 46, the Serbs only 4, and then 10 other, which would be, in this case, the Belgians at this point. Central Powers are in a very precarious situation, and mostly due to my inept management of the Central Powers. We've got France in the Rhine, and we've got the Russians in Prussia. Germany right now is going to be losing a total of 2 production points unless we can recapture those lands. And unfortunately, I'm in a terrible position. I can't bring enough forces to be able to recapture the Rhine. The French have placed in a total of 4 armies in the Rhine, and they have tactical air superiority in the area. Not to mention, this is a mountainous area, so they're going to be gaining a defensive benefit for that. I would need a minimum of 5 armies to retake the Rhine, and when the Western Allies' turn comes in, they very well could bring in 2 additional armies in there, and then you have a total of 6. Bigger problem, once they have a foothold across the Rhine, I'm going to have to defend 2 industrial regions. They would be able to strike at whichever one they chose, and obviously they would go after the one that would be the least defended. If they end up taking over Hanover, that's 3 production points, and I think you pretty much can kiss it goodbye. Not to mention, I don't know what the rule is for the High Seas Fleet. If the Allies, Western Allies, were to take over Hanover, that would include the naval bases on the North Sea, Wilhelmshaven, and I guess we'd have to make some type of a house rule where the German fleet would obviously move into the Baltic, probably at Stettin perhaps, and whether they would be able to challenge the blockade from the Baltic, I don't know. So I'm going to have to work on whether there is a rule for that, or if the designer has just built in that the German High Seas Fleet, he's placing the box there, but that would represent all German ports along the Baltic, perhaps. I don't know. That might be something we'll have to deal with. Now, this is the spring of 1915, and on spring turns, we're going to rebuild our event decks. We'll be adding in the 1915 cards for each of the member states, and that'll be shuffled, and then we'll have a mix of the leftover 1914 card along with these 1915 cards. So this ought to be quite interesting. So I've mixed in the 1915 cards into each of the event decks, and we're ready to begin play for the Central Powers, starting with Germany. We're going to draw one of their event cards. And they draw the 1915 card, Inspired Leadership. That's card number 38. Place 1 on 3 different German armies. Reroll all combat dice once if result was a loss, and re-rolling could change the outcome to a win. The marker remains in play if dice are not re-rolled or the re-roll wins the combat by a differential of 3 or greater. All right, so we're going to be placing 3 of those Inspired Leadership tokens. All right, this is the situation for the Central Powers. We've got France in the Rhine, very powerful force with air superiority. Got 4 armies in Belgium with 2 German heavy artillery units. And on the Eastern Front, I have 5 German armies ready to try to retake Prussia, which is being guarded now by 3 Russian armies. We do have the Austro-Hungarians. Their 4th army has moved into Brest-Litovsk, so that is some help. I've been struggling with the response that I have to make here, and none of my options appear to be any good. I can't muster enough strength this turn to be able to retake the Rhine. I can only move 2 armies. The other armies I have in Hanover and in Bavaria are spent. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to use my 5 armies in Prussia, or in Posen rather, to retake East Prussia. That would get me back 1 of my production points. The problem is in the meantime, if I can't retake the Rhine. I mean, that is an absolute fact. I cannot muster enough strength to retake it this turn. The French and British, the Anglo-French alliance is going to move in 2 more armies into the Rhine probably. And then how do you extricate them when they're in the mountains and they've got tactical air support? It's going to be very tough. Well, as for our German-inspired leadership tokens, I think what I'm going to do, we have 3 of them to place, and I think what we'll do is I'm going to place 1 basically on each front. We're going to place 1 on the German 1st Army in Belgium. We'll place another 1 on the German 8th Army in Posen, and I'll place another 1 on the spent German 7th Army in Hanover. I have to maintain possession of Hanover. The Ruhr Valley is worth 3 production points, and then we discussed already about the German fleet. I think I'm going to house rule that, where if those bases would be lost to conquest, German fleet would have to move into the Baltic. There would be no option, and I don't think they would be able to challenge the blockade from the Baltic very effectively without retaking the bases in Hanover. So I'm probably going to house rule that unless I can find something online that would contradict that. So now we'll move on to the German movement phase. We can move our armies and artillery, and I really don't know what to do. I could evacuate Belgium and move whatever units I can into Hanover, but it won't be enough this turn. And I'm going to have to, I think I'm going to think about this a little bit. Well, I must confess, I have really no answer for this situation other than I have to give up, if I have to give up Belgium in place. If I lose the Ruhr, I mean, it's game over. I'm never going to be able to recover from that. So I'm going to transfer the German 1st Army, I believe it was. Yes, the German 1st that has that leadership bonus into Hanover. And the bigger question becomes now, do you attempt to defend Bavaria and Hanover simultaneously? I will be able to build some armies, perhaps. But, well, I'm going to transfer the 3rd German from Belgium to Bavaria. If they do go into Hanover, the forces in Belgium would be cut off. So I'm just going to have to take my lumps and see what happens. I'm hoping that maybe on some of the other fronts we'll be able to put enough pressure there where we'll just stretch the Allies to the, too far, I guess. All right, so that's our movements. Now we have to decide if we want to challenge the British fleet in the blockade box. And seeing the critical situation that we're in, I think I might try it. The odds are going to be against us, but I think I'm going to give it a try. We're going to sortie the German high seas fleet from Wilhelmshaven. They're going to go into the blockade box and challenge the British home fleet for control of the North Sea. We'll see what happens. Our U-boats will remain on station in the unrestricted submarine warfare box. So that'll be the movement phase. Now we're going to move on to the combat phase, and we begin by resolving naval combat. Now how this is going to work to resolve naval combat is both players are going to roll one die for each fresh fleet that they have in the box. So Britain will be rolling 3 dice and the Germans will be rolling 2. On a roll of 1, a result of 1 on your dice inflicts 1 hit on the enemy. A roll of 2 inflicts 2 hits on the enemy. All of the results are misses. Both sides then apply any hits by flipping a fresh fleet to its spent side. If all the fleet units are already spent, then the additional hits are absorbed by elimination. And you eliminate a spent fleet for each hit, and that's how the naval combat will function. Well, I'm taking a big risk here, but we'll see what happens. So Britain will be rolling the 3 white, Germany will be rolling the 2 black dice, and we're looking for 1s and 2s to cause casualties. Okay, here is the roll. All right. Oh boy, not good. The British have 2 2s, which is going to inflict a total of 4 damage. The German High Seas Fleet only has a single hit. Oh, it's another disaster. All right, so we're going to take care of our casualties. Germany inflicts 1 hit on the Royal Navy. So they would absorb that by flipping one of the fleet counters. Royal Navy has 2 2s, which is a total of 4 hits. So that is going to flip both fleets, and both fleets are going to be destroyed in the process. And that's it. So the Battle of Jutland occurred in the spring of 1915, and the German Kriegsmarine was annihilated. Now those fleets can be rebuilt, and it costs 2 production to build a spent fleet and 3 production to build a fresh fleet. So with the military considerations that we've got right now, that it just isn't going to happen. I probably shouldn't have took a risk like that, but at this stage of the game, I don't know what else to do. All right, now we're going to move to our guerrilla combat in East Africa. And Letov Vorbeck is going to continue with his guerrilla campaign against the British East African Army. So he'll be rolling a d6, and on a result of 5 or 6, he's going to spend that British Army. And here's the roll. Result is a 6. So Letov Vorbeck continues with his successful guerrilla campaign in East Africa. It's one of the few areas that I've been doing well in. And that's going to spend the British East African force, and at least something we got out of it. All right. All right, now we're going to move to our resolving of ground combat. And I really don't have much choice here. I think I'm going to have to attack almost on all fronts, with the exception of Hanover and Bavaria. So on the Western Front, we're going to launch an attack supported by German heavy artillery into the Somme. So the German Second Army is going to attack the French Second Army. And we're going to be using the German heavy artillery. We'll use the first one, and that's going to give us 2 dice for the attack. And here's the attack roll. All right, Germany has a 2, and the Allies have a 2. They don't have tactical air deployed in the Somme, so Germany will win the battle. That is going to spend the French Second Army, and the German Second Army will be spent as well. We have 1 more army left in Belgium, and I'm going to, that'll gain us, by the way, the big push token. And I'm going to order the 4th Army to attack supported by heavy artillery and the big push counter. So that's going to give us 2 dice with a +1 modifier. And I guess the French 6th Army will defend, and we'll see what happens. Okay, here is the roll. All right, Germany has 5 + 1 for the big push is 6. The Allies have a 6. We're going to win the tie, and that is going to spend the French 6th Army along with the German 4th Army. And that is the extent of the combat on the Western Front. It was more of a diversionary attack to just soak up potential French units that could be moved into the Rhine. All right. Now we'll move to the Eastern Front. Germany has a total of 5 fresh armies in Posen. They're going to need to win 4 battles to kick the Russians out of East Prussia. Russia has 3 armies that are unspent, so we're going to need a total of 4 victories in order to drive them out. So I believe what we're going to do is I'm going to utilize my, I think it's the 1st Army, which has that inspired leadership. That's the 8th Army, I'm sorry. So I'm going to nominate that 8th Army with the inspired leadership. Now that inspired leadership, once again, allows us to re-roll all combat dice if the result was a loss, and re-rolling could change the outcome. And then we would make a separate roll to determine if that leadership is preserved or not. So that'll be the attack. It'll be the German 8th, and we'll be attacking the Russian 1st Army. All right. No other modifiers will apply, and here is the roll. It's a tie. So Germany is going to win that battle. That is going to spend the Russian 1st. And the German 8th Army will be spent as well. We did not use the reroll, so we don't have to worry about that. But we are going to gain the big push counter. So we'll add that towards the battle. And now we're going to obviously continue the attack. And I'm going to nominate now the German 5th Army is going to attack the Russian 5th Army. We have a big push, so Germany will gain +1 for the combat. And Germany lost that 5-4. So the German 5th Army is expended. The Russian 5th is not, and we've lost our big push counter. This is not good. I'm going to have to continue the attack with full guns. There's just no option. We're going to have the German 18th Army attack the Russian 5th. This time we have no dice roll modifier. Okay, here's the roll. And the Allies won 6-3. That is going to spend the German 18th. And I've got to seriously think about now, I won't have enough strength here to evict the Russians from Prussia. I would need another 1, 2, 3 armies to accomplish that, and I don't have that. So I think we're going to cancel the attack, and that'll allow me more production points to build new armies with. So I think that is the extent of the German combat step. We're going to move to production. We'll move on now to the U-boat attrition phase. We'll be rolling for 2 dice for each of the unspent U-boats in one of the attack boxes, in this case the unrestricted submarine warfare box. We'll see what happens. Okay, here's the first roll. First roll is a 3, and that says spent if the USA has declared war. They have not done that. So our first U-boat has escaped unscathed. Make the next roll. That roll is a 9, and that says it's spent if the Western Allies have U-1 technology active, and they do not. So both U-boats escape damage in the battle for the North Atlantic. That's great. All right, Germany has a total of 12 production. Now they're going to be losing 1 for the Rhine, and they'll be losing 1 for Prussia. So we're down to 10 production points. And we're going to have to start by refitting our armies. For sure, we have to refit the armies in Belgium, so that'll cost us 2 production points. And that leaves us with 8. All right, the next armies that have to be rebuilt, obviously the one in Bavaria. So we'll refit the 6th Army for 1 point. And then we've got 2 armies here with the inspired leadership. The 7th is going to be refit. That leaves us with 6. Now I have 2, excuse me, 2 spent armies in Posen. If I spend the 2 there to refit those, that would give us 4 points left, allowing us to buy 2 brand new armies. So I think that's the route we're going to go. So I'm going to refit the German 5th and 18th in Posen. Well, actually, I think I'll make it the 8th because that has that inspired leadership. We'll do that. So we're going to refit the 18th. That'll leave the 5th Army still spent. And then we're going to be building 2 new armies. That'll be a total of 6 production points. And we'll be laying out 2 additional armies now. 2 fresh armies. And we'll be placing, I guess, 1 for sure in Hanover. That would be 3 armies there. And this is where it gets tough. Where do you place this other army? Does it go in Bavaria? Or does it go in Hanover? I think we'll put it in Bavaria. And then that would kind of, all things being equal, France would probably try for Hanover, but we've got the German-inspired leadership tokens there. And that's going to conclude our production spending, and we'll move on now to our technological advances, and we'll have to hope that we can get something that is going to be helpful to us. And we end up pulling the card U1, Commerce Rating. That's outstanding. Submerged attacks and improved tactics increase U-boat effectiveness. Lothar von Arnold de la Pierre, the most successful submarine commander in history. Between 1915 and 1918, Lothar sailed on 15 patrols and sank 194 ships, totaling 453,716 tons. He sank more ships than any other U-boat commander in both the First and Second World Wars. And the effect on that says card effects listed on the U-boat attack table. So that's going to help us when we do our attacks. This U1 technology will probably allow us to score hits on the British merchantmen. That's great. And all that remains now is the regroup phase, and we're going to be able to reset our heavy artillery. And we'll just have to see what happens. And consulting our turn sequence, Germany is finished. We'll move on to the Western Allies. And the Western Allies will begin by rebuilding their event deck and drawing an event. And they pull the card, Gallipoli Invasion Demanded. It's a 1915 card. And it reads, the government wants results and mandates an invasion of Gallipoli under certain conditions. See event number 103 for description for details. Draw 1 more event card. All right, that note on the card about item 103, Gallipoli Invasion Demanded, it says if Gallipoli is not triple entente controlled, then the Western Allies must use a British army to attempt an amphibious invasion of Gallipoli on this turn unless there are no fresh British armies legally available to use, or the British have no fresh fleets, or Greece has fully declared war and is Triple Entente controlled, or a previous amphibious invasion of Gallipoli has already been attempted. Then it makes note of if the Austro-Hungarian fleets are active, etc. I'll probably scan this and bring it up on the screen for you to read, and we'll see what happens with this. Now the card does tell us that we have to draw one more event card, so we'll do that now. And that card is revealed to be Salonika. That's card number 39. It's a 1915 card. It says place in Greece on the Salonika open side. Western Allies may move one army to Greece. If moved on this turn, place a trench in Greece at no cost. Once a Western Allies enters Greece, Greece is considered to be a Triple Entente ally for production transfers and retreat purposes only. See 10.2.3.3 for additional details. All right. So we've been ordered to place the Salonika Open token in Greece. All right. Now, based on the instructions from the Gallipoli Invasion Demanded card, we will have to make the attack because the prohibitors would be the British have no fresh fleets. That does not apply. And there are no fresh British armies legally available to use. Greece has not fully declared war and is not Triple Entente controlled, and there has been no previous invasion of Gallipoli, so we're going to have to execute the Gallipoli attack. And I think we're going to use the British Fourth Army in the British Isles, and that's going to be placed in the amphibious attack of Gallipoli. So Gallipoli is currently defended by the 1st Turkish Army. So what we're going to do now is the 4th British Army is going to be making an amphibious invasion in Gallipoli. We'll place it on the border between the sea zone and Gallipoli, and we're supposed to mark that with the amphibious invasion token. Now the Western Allies are limited to 1 sea movement per turn. So we will not be able to transfer any units into Salonika because this is taking precedence over that. I am actually going to have to read the amphibious invasion rules to make sure I got a good handle on that prior to continuing the filming. So I'm going to take a break and I'm going to read through 7.3 amphibious invasion and make sure I have a good handle on that. All right, I've read the amphibious invasion rules, so I've got a good handle on that. We're going to complete the Western Allies movement on the turn. They have one more move remaining. And I think what the Western Allies will do is they're going to move this spent 4th Army from Verdun into the Rhine. And that will perhaps help against some German counterattacks there. The Western Allies trenches remain, even though that there's no one there. The trenches are not removed unless occupied, as what happened with the initial French attack into the Rhine. All right, that completes the movements. We'll move on to our combat phase, and we're going to resolve our amphibious invasion. The amphibious invasion will commence as follows. It says the invading army may only roll a maximum of 1 die, even if allowed more due to technology cards. The die can be only adjusted by a +1 if Great Britain immediately flips one of the fresh fleet's units to the spent side. Only 1 fleet may be spent for this purpose. And it has this historical note. It says it represents the deployment of British battleship and cruiser squadrons to conduct shore bombardment in preparation for the invading land forces. So they are going to do that. They have a total of 3 fleets. 1 is already spent. So they're going to place a spent fleet there to support the landings. That'll give the British a +1. The next step is, it says, if enemy units occupy the invading area, the defending player may roll 1 extra die. If at least any two of the defending dice are both higher than the attacker's roll, then the invading unit is permanently destroyed outright. No retreat is allowed. So the Turks have the full-strength First Army there. It's going to give them a total of 2 dice to roll. The British will have 1 die modified by +1 for the support of the Royal Navy. So we're going to make the roll, and then we'll determine what happens, whether we get a beachhead or not. We'll see. Okay, here is the roll. All right, the British were quite successful. They rolled a total of 7 with the gunfire support. The Turks only managed a 3. Continuing on with the rules, it says if the invading army wins but does not retreat the defending unit, or it is itself defeated but not destroyed, it will form a beachhead. The amphibious invasion marker is flipped over to its beachhead side. So that's what we're going to do. The Turks have been spent. We'll flip that token over to the beachhead side, and the British Fourth Army is also spent, I believe, because it's making a regular attack there. And that is the situation. I'm going to double check whether or not the Fourth Army is spent in the amphibious invasion. I would imagine it is. Yes, it clearly says at the top, the single invading army must attack the enemy land area using normal combat eligibility and resolution procedures. All right. Now the rules continue. We have a beachhead here. It says while an army is located with a beachhead, it is treated as being adjacent to the previously invaded land area. It can therefore be attacked from the same land area, and is, if then defeated and forced to retreat, it will be eliminated or naval evacuated. Units in a beachhead can be withdrawn on a later turn by using a sea move back to an eligible friendly land area. They cannot make another amphibious invasion directly from a beachhead. Now these beachheads can be reinforced with additional armies, and it goes on to talk about beachhead combat resolution. But for right now, this is what has happened. British have a beachhead in Gallipoli, and the Turks are still defending that area. So we're considering the beachhead to be an adjacent space to Gallipoli, is what that is. We'll move the spent British fleet back to the blockade box, and now they have only 1 unspent fleet in the blockade box. All right, this is the situation on the Western Front for the Allies. In the Somme, there are 2 active British forces there, including the Old Contemptibles. They would need a minimum of 3 attacks to clear Belgium out. So there are not enough non-spent units in the Somme to actually drive the Germans out. So I'm going to focus my attention in the Rhine. Now we have 4 active armies, 4 active French armies and 1 spent, plus the tactical air superiority marker. Now each of these groups has 3 German armies that are fresh opposing it, and I believe that is true. Let me double check that. Yes. So obviously the prize would be Hanover. No doubt about that. We would sever the supply link to these forces in Belgium. That would take a minimum of 4 successful attacks into that region to drive them out. The problem is if we did that, temporarily that would work, but then you've got these Germans in Bavaria that would be trying to get into the Rhine. I'm thinking I'm going to call for just a halt to any offensive operations, and I'm going to be able to maybe build fortifications. We can entrench now, so we'll build trenches in the Rhine to help defend that possession, and then with the remaining points we can maybe build some army. So we'll see if the response table agrees with my analysis. So what I'm saying is hold offensive operations in the Western Front. So we'll see what the die roll reveals, if it agrees or disagrees. The roll is a 1, and it says no and that's a blatant roll that does not agree. So that means they want to do the opposite, which is offensive operations. So if that is the case, we have to select either the Hanover or Bavaria. I'm going to check to see if Bavaria has mountains in it. I don't believe so. No, they don't. All right, well, we're going to make another roll and find out where we need to go. Where is the attack going to be centered on? If it was me, then, given this order, I would probably... Those German-inspired leadership tokens could be a problem that allows them a re-roll if it can change the result. I think we'll try to move into Bavaria and we'll see if the chart agrees. So we'll be launching a mass attack into Bavaria. The roll is a 1. It completely disagrees with that. That means they're going for Hanover. All right, so we're going to start launching attacks into Hanover. All right. All right, if that is the case, then I'm going to nominate the French 9th Army to attack, and we can decide who we're going to defend with. I'm going to use one of these inspired leadership armies. In this case, it will be the German 7th. And that would allow them a reroll if it can change the result. So let's see if I can get that in frame. Okay. So we're going to be rolling 1 dice each. There are no modifiers at this point. And we'll see what happens. Germany won 4-2. So that preserves the 7th Army, the German 7th Army. And that's going to spend the French 9th. All right, now that leadership marker is not affected because it hasn't been used. So we're going to continue to use that as our defending unit. And this time we're going to have the French 10th make the attack into the Hanover region. And the Germans won again 6-4. That's going to spend the French army, leaving them with 2 unspent armies there. Oh, I don't know whether they would want to continue that attack or not. They don't have the ability to drive the Germans out anymore, so I think they'll stand pat with what they have. And I think that's going to be all of the attacks on the Western Front. Be no actions in East Africa as that army is spent, so we'll take a look at the Middle East. The British have only 1 viable army on the board, and that's that Indian expeditionary force in Basra. And I think they're going to try to make, if we pressure the Turks enough, we might be able to break them. They have to refit that first army in Gallipoli. There's no doubt about it. They know that we're going to be refitting the units in the beachhead. Now they do have the 4th Army, which is intact in Damascus. So what I'm going to do is make an attack against an unoccupied space. Now that's going to spend the Indian Expeditionary Force in Basra, and it's going to cost us this Basra track for any non-Turkish units. If we aren't in the Basra space, it costs us 2 points to refit. So, but this will gain some ground, and we'll work out the rules for attacking a unoccupied location. The rules for attacking an unoccupied enemy area are as follows. The attacking player designates the fresh, friendly army that will be attacking the adjacent unoccupied enemy-controlled area that his alliance originally owned, which would be Baghdad. And then it says the attacking army automatically wins and conducts an advance. I think I'm reading the wrong one. The opposing alliance originally owned. I was reading the wrong one. That would be for attackers alliance originally owned. Okay, this is the opposing alliance originally owned. The attacking player designates the fresh friendly army that will be attacking the adjacent unoccupied enemy-controlled area that the opposing alliance originally owned. The designated area is a mountain swamp production or flag area. The garrison's fixed die roll is a 3. Otherwise, it is a fixed die of 2. So that means that the Turks are going to have a result of 2 in Baghdad right now. That would represent provisional forces, maybe at a divisional level or corps level perhaps. All right. And the attacker rolls 1 die and applies any combat modifiers. In some cases, the attacker is allowed to roll more than 1 die. The player then rolls all the allowable dice simultaneously, applies all applicable modifiers, and selects the single highest die. The attacker loses the combat if the highest net die is less than the garrison's fixed roll. Regardless of the outcome, the attacking army is flipped to the spent side. So that we are going to be spending the Indian Expeditionary Force. And now the British are going to roll, and all they have to do now is roll anything other than a 1, and they will have taken Baghdad. The result is a 4. That exceeds the nominal defense of Baghdad, and the Indian Expeditionary Force moves in and takes Baghdad. All right. And I think that's going to be all of the Western Allies combat. We'll move on to the production phase. All right, the blockade is still intact. There are no events to resolve, so we're going to go through with our U-boat attack segment. There's 2 active U-boats in the unrestricted sub-warfare box. Here's the 2d6 roll. First roll is an 8, and that says there's success if unrestricted warfare, and increase the USA entry marker 1 space if the Sussex pledge is in place. It is not, so they are going to do 1 damage to the British economy. Now we'll roll for the second sub. And the roll is a 3, and that says success if Western Allies' U-2 technology is not active. And that is true. They do not have U-2 technology, so another point of strategic damage is done to the British economy. All right. And we'll begin by receiving our transfer production. France has 1 point, so they're going to be able to exchange that for 1 production point. France's normal production rate is 4, so we'll give them 4 additional production points. Gives them a total of 5. All right. All right, I think France is going to refit all 3 of these armies in the Rhine. That will cost them 3 points. 3 production points. It leaves them with 2. So we have the choice now of building a new army, refitting some spent armies in the Somme, which might be probably a good tactic that would allow the combined Anglo-British army to strike into Belgium as it's weakened. Or we could build 1 new fresh army. So, oh boy, I guess we'll spend the 2 to get the French 6th and 2nd armies active again. That'll be the total French production for the turn. We'll move on to the British. England has a production value of 7, but they are going to lose 2 points to the sub-warfare, so they're down to 5. And they've got a lot of stuff that they need to refit. We'll begin with East Africa. British are going to spend 1 of their 5 to reconstitute the British East Africa Army. Leaves them with 4. We'll move on now to the Mediterranean. Britain is going to use sea supply, and we are going to refurbish the 4th British Army on the beachhead of Gallipoli. It'll leave England with 3 production remaining. Now, with the we haven't been able to solidify that Salonika open yet. In order to actually use that as a port of entry at a reduced cost to allow us to give supply to Serbia, it says once a Western Allies army enters Greece, Greece is considered a Triple Entente ally for the purposes of production point transfer. So until that happens, it would still cost us 2 points. So I think what we'll do is we're going to spend 2 production points to reconstitute the Indian Expeditionary Force in Baghdad. On this track, if you're not a Turkish unit, it costs 2 points unless you are in Basra. They'll spend their final production point in Sinai, getting the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force ready for action. All right. And now we'll move on to the Western Allies' technological advances, and we'll see what research they come up with. They pulled the technology U-1, and that's Q ships. And that says early anti-submarine warfare attempted to reduce the U-boat menace. Q ships were heavily armed merchant ships with concealed weaponry designed to lure submarines into making surface attacks. They would then open fire and sink the submarines. Card effects listed on the U-boat attack and attrition tables will be modified by that U-1 technology Q ships. All right. Yeah, those ships were actually very interesting. They had deck guns below the deck level of it. It would look like a normal transport, and they would be able to pop these things up with, one movement, and the gun was ready to fire. So it was a very ingenious way of arming merchant ships. Next is the regroup phase, and that would deal with the air superiority. We have the option now to, Germany still has no air technology, so we can place that tactical air superiority marker anywhere we want. Currently it's in the Rhine, and we could either leave it there or redeploy it somewhere else. And I think we'll leave it in the Rhine for now. And that'll complete the Western Allies' turn. We'll move on to the Eastern Allies. And we'll begin by adding in their 1915 cards into the deck and drawing an event. The card is revealed to be card number 31, the Russian Steamroller, 1914 to 1915 card. During the Eastern Allies production phase, raise new units step. Place a spent Russian army in Petrograd and Moscow areas at no cost. All right. All right, this is going to be the movement phase now for the Eastern Allies. We'll begin in the Russian front, and yeah, it's a tough one. We don't like Austria-Hungary being in Brest-Litovsk. That would allow them to place 2 additional armies in there and maybe kind of flank all that stuff in Prussia. So we need to make attacks to get Brest-Litovsk back. There's no doubt about that. Question is how do I do it? If we weaken Prussia, Germany's going to slide in there. There's no doubt. We can't weaken that. I do have 2 available Russian armies in the Ukraine that can be used. We take a minimum of 2 successful attacks to get rid of them. This is a tough one. We're going to be building some armies, so we'd have that ability to replace some of the stuff. I think what we'll do is we won't do any movements. I could make the assumption that we're going to make the attack successful in Brest-Litovsk, and then we could move that army in Minsk to the Ukraine. The risk, if we don't close that gap, Austrians are going to pour into there. Yeah, I think we'll stand pat, and we're going to go on to our combat phase now, and we're going to launch an attack into Brest-Litovsk. And we'll nominate the Russian Third Army for the attack. Austro-Hungarian 4th will be defending. And here's the roll. There's no modifiers. Austro-Hungary won 4-2. That army remains intact, and the Russian 3rd is spent. Well, they don't have enough force to eject the Austrians from Brest-Litovsk. They can only have 1 more attack. That would be it. I think they have to make the attack to try to paralyze that army and not allow it to have offensive action during the coming turn. We'll try the attack again. We'll renew it with the Russian 8th Army. Here's the roll. And that's a tie, 1-1, and that means the Russians will win. The Russian 8th is spent, and the Austrian 4th is spent, and that's it. They don't have enough forces to... Well, we do have enough forces if we launch the attack from Prussia into there, and I think that's what they'll do. So the Russian 5th Army in Prussia is going to attack into Brest-Litovsk. It's going to weaken that Prussian front. Oh boy, I don't know if that's worth it. We'd have to move that Russian army to advance into Brest-Litovsk. It would close the gap, but that would weaken the Prussian area. Boy, that's a tough one. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to use the response table, and the question is should we attack from Prussia? Here's the roll. The result is an 11, and that's yes, so we will do it. All right, so the Russian 5th Army will be attacking the Austro-Hungarian 4th in Brest-Litovsk. It's a tie, and that's enough to win. So the Russian 5th Army is spent, and the Austrians must retreat, and they will retreat to Galicia. The Russian 5th Army will move into Brest-Litovsk, retaking that for the Tsar. All right, and then we'll turn our attention now to the Serbian front. Now the Serbs don't have any production points at this stage, so they will not be able to reconstitute their armies. Any type of Austrian attack into Serbia could eject them, and then they would have to retreat into Greece. Yeah, I think we'll stand pat, and we'll let the Austrians do what they will, but this way we have some chances with the defense of the mountains and that, so I think we'll do that. We'll move on now to the production phase. Serbia has no production this turn, so we'll move on to the Russians. Russians are going to use that event card, Russian Steamroller, and that's going to allow them to place a spent Russian army in both Petrograd and Moscow. So they are going to be placing the Russian 6th Army in Petrograd, in a spent state, and the Russian 7th Army in Moscow. All right. And now their standard production, Russia has a production value of 4. So they've got 4 production points. And they're definitely going to have to use those for refits. They're definitely going to be spending 1 to refit the 1st Army in Prussia, and spending 2 to refit the 8th and 2nd Armies in the Ukraine. And then it's the question of, do we spend our final one either in Brest-Litovsk or in the Ukraine? I think we have to do the one in the Ukraine. We have an escape route or a retreat route into Minsk if we have to retreat that army. So we will spend it reconstituting the Russian 3rd Army, and that is all of the Russian production. And there is nothing to do in the regroup phase, and that will end the turn for the Eastern Allies. So we'll move on from the Eastern Allies to the Central Allies. And we'll begin by adding the 1915 cards into the Central Allies deck, and we'll draw an event. That card is revealed to be card number 44, Shackled to a Corpse. It's a 1915 card. Place in Vienna. DRM of -1. All attacking Austro-Hungarian armies for the remainder of the game. Modifier canceled if Germany spends 1 production point or German unit is in the attacking area. Oh my goodness, it can't get much worse than this. So we place the shackled to a corpse token in Vienna, and that is going to seriously affect any Austrian offensive action for the rest of the game. Oh my goodness. Well, I think to facilitate my remembering of that, I'm going to place a blue token there. Actually, I'll make it a white. I'm going to place a white token there, and I'm going to place a white token on that shackled to a corpse card, which will hopefully draw me to remembering that. All right. Now, I should have mentioned earlier, when Turkey came online, there is an extra move action available to the Central Allies. You can make one Austrian or Bulgarian move and a Turkish move, and then still make another Turkish move. So it would technically allow you up to 3 movements in the area, but Turkey can never have more than 2 moves. So, knowing that, and now with this shackle to a corpse card, boy, can't get much worse than this. There was one thing that came up in the rules that I'm not sure about, and that involves German transfers of production to Turkey. Now, the rules clearly state that you're only able to give production through one neutral country. So right now, in order for Germany to give production to Turkey, without Serbia being controlled, we would have to go through Romania and neutral Bulgaria in order to give production to Turkey. And if that's true, Germany won't be able to give production to them unless they can either occupy Serbia and then go through one neutral into Turkey, or take Romania and go through Bulgaria into Turkey, or if Bulgaria comes online, then we would only be going through one neutral then. So I guess that's how it goes, but I'm not sure. Well, now we're into our movement phase, and I think what we'll do is I'm going to try to take care of Serbia, I think. So what we'll do is I'm going to make a movement of the Austrian heavy artillery into Hungary, and I suppose if I move that 10th, the Italians will come into the fray. So I think what I'll do is I'll move the 6th Austrian Army out of Bosnia into Hungary, and then we'll make an attack with that force on Serbia. We'll use the heavy artillery to help offset the shackled to a corpse dice roll modifier. So we will be nominating the Austro-Hungarian 5th Army. We'll spend that and the artillery. It'll allow us to roll 2 dice. Now we're going to be at a -1 dice roll modifier for the Austrians. The Serbs are going to be at a +1 for the mountains. So here's the roll. Oh my goodness. All right, snake eyes for the Central Powers. That means that Serbia has won the battle. We would have a score of 0 on those. They won 2-0. And I can't renew the attack with the 6. We can't eject them. So we're just going to have to stand pat. Oh my goodness, I can't believe how bad these rolls are. I forgot about the Turks. The Turks have 1 movement point that they could have used. That's that special ability on the Near East map. We took 2 Austrian moves, moving an army and the heavy artillery, and I still should have been able to take 1 move with the Turks. So I'm going to take that out of turn, and we're going to move the 4th Ottoman Turkey army from Damascus to Mosul. We have to stop this Indian expeditionary force from moving too close to Anatolia. We'll have to give up some space to the MEF. They're probably going to walk into Jerusalem, but we won't have any attacks. I have only 1 production point for Turkey. I'm going to have to use that to refit the 1st Army in Gallipoli. So we'll move on now to the production phase. The Ottomans have 1 production point. They're going to spend that to refit the First Army in Gallipoli. And that will be the extent of Turkish production. We'll move on to Austria-Hungary. All right, Austria-Hungary has a production level of 3. And we're going to have to spend these to refit some armies. And, well, I guess we're going to spend 1 to refit the 5th Army in Hungary. We'll spend 1 to refit the First Army in Galicia. And I'm going to spend 1 to produce a new army in a spent condition and place that in Bosnia. So we will be placing the, do I have any Austrian armies? Yes. We're going to be placing the 7th Austro-Hungarian Army in a spent condition in Bosnia. That'll be at least better than the provisional forces that would be there, and if Serbia chooses to attack it, at least we get to roll a full die. So that is going to be the extent of Austrian production. And we would move on to the regroup phase where we can refit our heavy artillery and reset it. So that's ready to go. And that is going to bring the spring 1915 turn to a close. So I'm going to wrap up the video here, and we are going to continue with the summer of 1915 turn and see what happens. The Central Powers are under threat from almost all directions. The Turkish front, Austro-Hungary now with their -1 die roll modifier to attacks with that shackle to a corpse token. That's going to severely limit the offensive ability of Austria-Hungary until I can get some German units in there. I'm still down 2 production points. We've stabilized the Western Front a little bit. We contained the attack into Alsace-Lorraine. But how do I retake this thing? I mean, they've got 4 armies in there. They've got tactical air superiority. We're just going to have to try, I guess, is all we can do. We do have these German-inspired leadership tokens on a couple of armies, which give us the chance to re-roll if we're able to change the result. We'll just have to see what happens, but boy, it's very difficult to... it's like whack-a-mole. You're basically trying to put out fires almost everywhere in the map for the Central Powers. Probably worst of all is I've squandered the High Seas Fleet. That's gone. Well, we will continue on with the summer 1915 turn in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're enjoying this playthrough. Please join me next time for the coming video. In the meantime, have a nice day.
Pack up your troubles in your old kit.